Hello, everyone. Very honoured to have been asked to talk to you and tell you a little bit about the work of UN Women. I'll start by telling you a bit about the organisation first, and then delve into the tempestuous relationship between STEM and women's rights. And I'll also tell you about the women's empowerment principles that UN Women uses for businesses. It was just mentioned as well by Elsevier, and how these can help STEM companies to become more inclusive. So, who has not heard of UN Women? Well, actually, a lot of people have heard of UN Women here. You're far above average in knowing UN Women, but you're not an average audience, of course. Usually, I try to explain that it's UNICEF, but then for women's rights instead of children's rights. But we're a little bit the unseen little sister in the UN agency community. And we're way, way, way smaller than UNICEF. For example, Saudi Arabia gives 20 million a year to UNICEF and then 0 to UN Women. And then there's, of course, the US and Russia, who don't much agree with the reproductive rights work that we do and give very little to UN Women. So, yeah, we are a little bit more dependent on individuals and businesses that do think gender equality is a priority. The organisation consists of a headquarters in New York, and we have 60 field offices from which projects are carried out in 90 countries worldwide. And we also have 15 national committees, of which the Dutch is the most recently founded one. So we're just coming up to our 2nd anniversary in 8 days. A national committee raises funds for the work of UN Women worldwide, and it also tries to implement the International Women's Rights Treaty in their own country, because while there are undoubtedly a lot of countries where the situation is worse, there's so much yet to be done in the Netherlands too. There's 5 core topics that UN Women concentrates on. These have been chosen because that's where we can make the biggest difference, and these are topics that no other UN agency covers. We explicitly involve men and boys in much of the work that we do. In 2014, the He for She campaign was launched by Emma Watson with a wonderful speech in the General Assembly of the United Nations. Who's seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you haven't yet, do look it up on YouTube. It's absolutely brilliant. I watch it at least every quarter again to get inspired again. Yeah, and all our core topics have some relation to the STEM sector and the digital world, for very good and unfortunately also for quite bad. Female leadership, oh, I can actually sort of see it there. I should have brought glasses. Female leadership, which applies to leadership in politics, but also in communities, in the economy, in media and elsewhere. One example of what very good STEM can do there is that new technologies work wonders for indigenous female politicians who try to run for office in South America. They are very often completely ignored by mainstream media, but through social media can get their message out to voters anyway. On the other hand, of course, as far as leadership is concerned, you've probably experienced or seen that especially STEM sectors seem fairly resistant to female leadership, and the number of female leaders is still fairly low. A similar experience with ending violence against women. On the one hand, technology has given women some very valuable tools to increase their safety, the mobile phone being the first and foremost of that. It's just a device that you can use on the go to let loved ones know where you are, to call someone if you feel unsafe. I do remember the time before mobile phones. I think I was 25 when I bought my first. And before that, you just went out drinking but couldn't let your father, your mother, anyone know whether you were safe, and if you weren't, you couldn't really call anyone. So this in itself is already a huge improvement. But on the other hand, the internet, for instance, is used as a tool in the worst excesses of violence against women. Girls are trafficked in the dark web, child porn is exchanged, women and girls are blackmailed into forced sex by threats of internet exposure, and multiple more. For most of the other core topics, the situation is the same, a very mixed experience with STEM. Therefore, I dare to state that the experience with STEM is gendered. Men and women have a different experience with science, technology, engineering, math, and definitely medicine. For women, the opportunities are far greater, essential even, but the challenges are far greater too. STEM innovation has been responsible for many of the major breakthroughs in gender equality over the past century. In the 50s, one was, of course, the innovation and general availability of household appliances. Especially the washing machine was an incredible time saver. Of course, it would have been even more time-saving if men started to do half of the housework, but it proved to be easier to invent a machine to do the laundry and vacuuming than to ask a man to do it. We should never underestimate what these appliances have meant to our mums as opposed to our grandmothers. Another STEM-related major event was, of course, the invention of the birth control pill. Women suddenly had control over protection against unwanted pregnancy, and could have more control over the number of children they had. When the pill became widely available in the 1960s, it was a great spur for the sexual revolution, also for women. And a third breakthrough is, of course, the digital revolution. Digital inventions are still happening on a daily basis, and so we're discovering advantages for women of that on a daily basis too. There's suddenly access to information for women in third world or oppressive societies who never used to be able to access news or other resources useful to them. There's opportunities for women with children to work from home, to call in for meetings remotely, to organize working time differently through mobile communication, making it easier to combine kids with work. And there's social media, which gives women the opportunity to collectively speak up, such as in the Me Too campaign that shook the world in the past year. UN Women tries to develop projects that tap into the opportunities afforded to women by STEM innovations. One beautiful example is a project where African women farmers receive market prices and can trade their produce over a mobile phone, making them less vulnerable to being ripped off by middlemen, and also, not unimportantly, making them less vulnerable to sexual abuse by middlemen by decreasing their dependence on them. Another way in which mobile phones help women tremendously is assisting them in natural disasters. In natural disasters like a hurricane, women are far more likely to die than men. This is for a number of reasons. They have less mobility since they are far less likely to own a car. They are less likely to be able to swim because of social conceptions. They are less likely to even know that a hurricane is coming because generally people hear about it over the radio in a car, and again, women are less likely to own a car. And painfully, women die more because they are more likely to save their children before themselves. After the Asian tsunami many years ago, they collected sex-segregated data in Indonesia and found that a whopping 70% of the dead were women. To counter this, UN Women has set up a mobile phone system for women on Fiji, which is of course a hurricane-prone region, to inform women of oncoming hurricanes and to inform them of ways to protect themselves, their children and their possessions. And this has already led to a decrease in female mortality this hurricane season. As a last example, I'd like to mention barefoot colleges that are supported by UN Women. They empower women through engineering. The idea is that women in a marginal position, so women with a handicap or widowed women or otherwise marginalized women, learn how to install and repair small solar power units. This not only brings their livelihood to these women, but also helps rural third world communities cook safely and have light in the evenings. So seen from the positive side, it seems that STEM innovations offer women great assets to finally smash patriarchy. With STEM innovations, women have more control over their time, their bodies, their education, their safety, and it's exactly what we've always wanted. With STEM innovations, physical strength becomes less and less important, while strength of thought becomes more important. And it's then no longer physical attributes that hold women back, those things that we can't really do much about. It's social conceptions and stereotypes that do, and those can be changed, hopefully. But
I have to take a photo of that. Can I take a photo of this? Thanks.
You'd like the telephone case?
Thank you.
Right. But, and you knew a but was coming up, of course. Innovation and the digital worlds are not all beer and skittles for women. The balance of power between men and women is quite resistant to change. The new digital and innovative era have not come into existence in a vacuum. They've been created in real-life society such as it is, and therefore mirrors that society and the power imbalances within it. Aside from those I mentioned earlier, there are some other major downsides for women and girls. One of the real-life problems that is flooding into the digital world is violence against women. A bizarre 73% of women who are online have experienced cyber harassment in one form or another. It can take many forms. The official definition is, and I've written it down here, harassment by means of email, text or online messages or the internet, including but not limited to unwanted sexually explicit emails, texts or messages, inappropriate or offensive advances on social networking websites, threats of physical and or sexual violence by email, text or online messages, hate speech, meaning language that denigrates, insults, threatens or targets an individual based on her identity. Now, especially in ICT, journalism and politics, women are targeted. In short, women with opinions who work in male-dominated sectors. And I used to be a politician before I started working with the UN and have been targeted myself. And when it first happened, I tended to think it just comes with a job. If you are a politician, you have to have a thick skin, and this is just what happens. But then I discovered that the experience is very different for men and women. Men are far less likely to be attacked on their personality or looks or be threatened with sexual violence. If they are attacked, they tend to be attacked on the actual content of their points of view, which sounds like a much better deal. As someone has said, for many women, cyberspace has become just another dark alley where women have to look over their shoulders, watch what they wear, and watch what they say. In some ways, harassment in the digital world is also different from harassment in the real world. It's anonymous, it's often across borders, it favors mobbing, and it's subject to different social norms. Most of the offensive things that men say to women on social media, they would never dare say to their faces. But why on earth would they think that it's okay to abuse someone just because it's by computer or by phone? Cyber harassment is extra harmful because it has an effect on how welcome women feel in the digital world and the ICT sector. Many girls didn't feel drawn to STEM sectors anyway because of stereotypical images. This leads to another major challenge, the lack of women in STEM. I'm sure you've all been bombarded with figures and facts about the lack of women in STEM in the past few days. Many women are losing their jobs in sectors like administration or healthcare because of automation and robotization, and a lot of jobs that are replacing that in the labor market are in ICT. But there, women are lagging behind in a major way. This in turn affects the sector negatively as well. Fewer women in STEM sector makes women feel less welcome. And a case in point is that while in general about 40% of women have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace, for ICT companies it's 65%. So while women have made huge progress on the labour market over the past decades, this progress is now somewhat under threat by the gender gap, especially in ICT and STEM. So while it's fair to say that STEM helps smash the patriarchy, it's also fair to say that STEM perpetuates it, even if the sector doesn't become more gender diverse. So what can we do about that? Especially in the Netherlands, there's a lot of emphasis on the individual responsibility of women and girls to go into STEM sectors and to rise through the ranks. There's campaigns for girls to choose smartly and choose a better science studies and go to work in these sectors. There's coaching and mentoring programs for women. But trying to convince women and girls to study and work in STEM is only half the story. STEM companies themselves need to fundamentally change their attitude, work processes, and culture to welcome women. So how do we change STEM businesses, or business in general, or society in general for that matter? As I see it, there's 3 stages of diversity policy, and we should try to be aiming for the 3rd. The first stage is training, coaching, and mentoring of women. There's a good incentive for companies to do this because they get a larger pool of qualified candidates, and this is, of course, very important in the aging society. With the looming shortage of STEM employees, it's important for any company to have a lot of quality candidates to choose from. And training, coaching, and mentoring of women is a very good thing, don't get me wrong, but not if it stops there. If it stops there, it's nothing more than helping women fit in with the normal people, men. Women are treated as the odd ones out, the ones that need to be molded to be more like men, who are the normal people in STEM jobs and management. So going on to the second stage. Taking measures to make it easier for women to combine work and life, such as adapted work times, care leave, working from home, calling in remotely for meetings. There are good reasons for companies to do that. Diversity in staff and management is really good for business, as it helps tuning into consumers' wishes. This makes a lot of sense. Women do tend to understand the consumer really good, since they are the consumer. Over 70% of household buying decisions are made by women. Research shows time and again that companies with more women in staff and management positions turn higher profits. This, of course, creates a little bit of a weird paradox. Women are extra vulnerable for companies because they actually have a life. But meanwhile, men who only work are the norm. So while work-life balance measures are a good step in the right direction, if only women take up these measures, the leave, and use flexible working times, and women are the only ones that call in, women remain the odd ones out compared to the norm. In that case, it's just helping women, the others, to deal with their otherness. Men who just work are still the norm, while women need to be helped with their problem, the having a life. Against all evidence, having a life is still seen as a kind of a handicap instead of the asset that it is. So going on to stage 3, a good human resource policy for everyone. With opportunities for women as well as men to have a life, and where having a life is actually seen as an asset. Men would greatly benefit from this too, because you wouldn't say it, but there are roughly as many fathers as there are mothers. And while women are often already discouraged from talking about their children at work for fear of being taken less seriously, it's even greater taboo for men. Care needs to be revalued in companies. There's often outcry when women in top jobs get asked in the media how they combine work and family life, the typical women's questions. And mostly the general opinion is that women shouldn't get asked these questions anymore. But I think we should reverse that. We should not stop asking women these questions. We should start asking them of men. So next week, when you're at the coffee machine, ask all your male colleagues about how their daughter did in her football match this weekend. Ask whether they feel guilty when they aren't there at school to pick up the kids. Ask how they deal with their elderly dad who needs care. Men should be asked these questions as well, and end the dichotomy between life and work. A good human rights resource policy creates a new normal for everyone at all levels, so no one is the odd one out anymore. This requires a change in organization of work systems and time, but mainly a change in mindset, that of women, that of men, and that of companies. UN Women tries to contribute to that with a number of projects. As a fairly new issue, we've taken up to research and combat cyber violence against women, trying to make cyberspace a safer place for girls and women. To inspire girls to go into ICT jobs, we have the Girls Go IT project in many countries around the world, in which girls learn how to code, but also get empowerment trainings. We have the He for She campaign to engage men and boys, involving among others CEOs of global companies as allies. And we have the Women's Empowerment Principles to engage companies and help them become more gender diverse. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the Empowerment Principles. This is a set of 7 principles. You can read them out there. And any company can sign those principles online with the CEO statement. This is purposely the CEO because one of the main things is that it's very important to have leadership commitment. Signing means that the company commits to adapt not only human resource policies, but also looks at things like the supply chain, marketing, and ways to reach out to the community, whether that be consumers or workers or business partners. Since 2017, there's also an analysis tool to accompany the principles. It's an online questionnaire that any company can take anonymously. It has 18 questions, which doesn't sound like a lot, but they all have very many sub-questions, so it takes about 3 hours to complete it. It's very deep going. And it covers all kinds of ways in which companies can contribute to gender equality. It's meant to be applicable to all companies in all sectors and regions, as long as they have 10 employees or more. And the areas covered by the WEPs tool are, again, much broader than just human rights policy, human resource policy. Also marketing, how do you advertise, the supply chain, where are your products produced, and how is women's safety guaranteed there, for instance, and the social impact that a company has externally are taken into account. Once all questions have been answered, a report comes running out telling the company what they're doing well and whether there's room for improvement, and it gives some ideas on how to do this improvement.
Sorry, Marije, just to let you know, coming up to about 4 minutes left in case you wanted to leave any time for questions.
Okay, well, I'm almost done. Almost done.
Great.
Yeah, and just everyone can just see the questions on the Webstool website. They are already fairly inspiring and give ideas of what you could think of. For instance, taking women's rights into account in outsourcing, check on labour circumstances of women in production facilities abroad, or the company that cleans your office, or the company that cooks your lunch in the company restaurant, or to think about women in product development, especially relevant for medicine, where a lot of products are tested solely on men because women have these hormones and they're inconvenient test subjects, but women will be end users of these medications. The ultimate goal of the Women's Empowerment Principles is to create a global benchmark so that companies can measure their efforts against others by region, by sector, and by company size. If enough companies participate, their anonymized data will give a picture of the state of play of gender equality in business, and also how that contributes to implementing the global sustainable development goals. So up to now, not that many Dutch companies have taken the test, unfortunately, and actually there's more participants from other continents than Europe, but we're hoping to change that in the coming years. This is especially relevant, I think, for the STEM sector because it is so crucial to gender equality in the future. I think equality in society needs equality in STEM and vice versa. So that concludes my talk.
Sure.
If you're interested in any of our projects, you can contact me here. I've just run out of business cards earlier this week, so do jot down my email address if you want to be in touch. You can also check out the website. It's being renewed at the moment, but you can still register for the newsletter, for instance. And there's also a possibility to donate. It would be wonderful if you could consider that, because every donation helps a bit with our projects here and in the other 90 countries across the world.
Sure.
Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you.
And on the website, I have some info sheets with me. So if you're really interested, then just
do I see any pressing questions? Anything that's coming out at you? There's not much time left, so I guess you'll look for Marie in the networking break in 30 minutes.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, great. So thanks so much.